Hi, good afternoon, everybody. How many here this afternoon were in this morning's session? Okay, a bunch of you. Rest assured, this is not going to be a duplicate session. Okay, we wanted to open with the same video. So welcome back. This afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit more at the micro level, more anecdotal. And so to help me get Reality Bytes started, I've got the same cohorts from this morning, but I have Alex Castro, Melody Hayes, Sumi Smith, Paul Smith, and Bill Otterbeck. We've got a couple of helpers, Monique and Ralph, who are helping us with the logistics, and then their fantastic videographer back there. Hi, video lady. Thank you very much for all the good work you're doing. But welcome to Reality Bytes. And I guess if reality bites you, one of the things you could do is bite back, but that doesn't always work, right? So, we thought we'd get this play on words and offer you this afternoon the reality of the situation as much as possible. I think if you heard the keynote during lunch, it was, again, more of a reality check. What really happens in the real world? What do I really have to do? And so he had mentioned an F word. What was the F word that we heard at the lunch keynote? Failure, right. So I have another F word for you. Besides fun, it's fear. Okay, so this slide is a message to you about not losing your nerve when it comes to change. And easier said than done, right? Because again, there are a lot of things at play. If you're scolded every time you bring bad news and say something that has that other F word in there, like failure, the chances of you running back up there and taking the message over and over again are pretty nil, right? Because number one, nobody likes to get beat up. Number two, fear of failure in itself is just not a happy place to be. There's a lot of things that are going on inside you emotionally, because you're smart enough to know what you should be doing and could be doing and are doing. And even though you're doing all of that, something goes wrong. And you just, you have the emotions kick in. So we're only human, which is what organization change management is all about. You've got processes, but you also have people. So we want to encourage everybody that we're going to share some anecdotal, stories with you today that will hopefully help you to not lose your nerve when it comes to organization change management. The Harvard Business Review put out a really great article not too long ago called Accelerating Corporate Transformations, and the subtitle was Don't Lose Your Nerve. Now, it was corporate transformations, but the scale of the work that's done in the corporate arena is pretty much at the same scale that you guys are hitting, if not a little more difficult because of the regulations and all of the mandates that you work within, legislative and governance in general. So in that article, it did describe some of the reasons why change happens slow. And the way to accelerate the change is to get over some of the brakes that are put on. So if brakes are occurring, what are some things that you could do to accelerate? Well, here's some of the brakes. See if any of these sound familiar to you. So you have a cautious management culture. That's a speed brake. That'll slow change down like nobody's business. You have a business as usual management process. Anybody familiar with that, right? How about initiative gridlock? Not that ever happens in the government, right? We never have gridlock. Everybody just flows and decisions are made very readily. Disengaged employees. If you were in this morning's session, you heard us talk a little bit about that. How do we get people engaged? Then at lunch, once again, heard about how do you get people engaged. How about a loss of focus during execution? Kind of the old, we've been doing this for a while, but what the heck, why were we doing this and what were we trying to accomplish in the first place? So when those things occur, those really are the things that'll put the brake on anything that you're trying to get going. So if you're not going to lose your nerve, one of the things you can do is something called the no slack launch. The no slack launch is also from the Harvard Business Review. And the intent of no slack launching is you do this while your normal stuff is going on. So this is not going to replace anything that's going on, but this is a way to get some of those speed brakes loosened up. You confront reality, again, easier said than done, but we're going to hear today some ways to actually make that happen. We're going to focus your vision and the business model. Again, it's how to retain that focus, remembering why you're doing what you're doing and who you're doing it for. Aligning to the transformation initiatives. Things keep changing. So how do you know that you're still in alignment with where the organization is going? And then how do you know that your team is in alignment with those goals as well? And how do you do all of that when everything is moving? And then lastly, to engage everyone from top to bottom. In our morning session, we talked about the fact that organization change really affects everybody no matter what level, position, role you have in the organization. So anything that is going to be effective has to be everyone included. So it's definitely an everyone from the top down. Some of the process behind this is integrating change management into your project management activities. So if change is implemented via something called a project, and you guys are awesome project managers and you have a method to all the madness, you have a process and a procedure, there's actually a way to integrate organization change management activities so that it doesn't feel like it's an additional burden. So on this next slide, I want you to look at, hopefully you can see this. If you can't see this, sorry, I'll read this. But on the left-hand side, you have something that looks pretty familiar, right? Does that look familiar to you guys? Been there, done that, okay? Initiate the project, scope, plan, design, develop, deploy. On the right-hand side, we've put some of the OCM, or the Organization Change Management activities, you can do while you're in these specific stages. So for instance, in initiating the project, you want to conduct readiness assessments and impact analysis about the change and how it's going to affect people. Scoping and planning, you want to identify and start building your sponsor coalition. You want to select and prepare your change management team. So this is helping you to see where do you actually start doing these things. And then in planning, there's this thing called communicate why the change is being done. That is going to be a repetitive theme here. You heard it this morning, you're going to keep hearing more about it, and it's because it's so important. So here at the planning, you're going to communicate. In design, you're going to prepare and equip your managers and supervisors so they can get the job done. You're going to launch some group and coaching sessions. You're going to reinforce messages with your sponsors, which then again is more communicating. So you guys who are in the design and deployment, notice that you communicate, communicate, communicate. So again, it's everybody, all levels, anywhere in the organization, technical people, business people, everybody has a role in making sure that communication is happening. Then you get into deployment, and there you go again, more communication. Okay, so hopefully we're not sounding like such a broken record, but I don't know how many times we've said the word communicate, and it's not because we don't think you get it, it's just that we want you to hear how important we believe it is. Critical sponsorship, or the critical role of sponsorship. We wanted to showcase this to you as well. It's a common theme. ProSci, who does a phenomenal research, comes up year after year when they survey people. Since 1998, the #1 critical success factor was having an active sponsor. So there must be something to having your sponsor not only show up, but keep showing up. So one of the biggest mistakes is your sponsor walks away too soon. Maybe they showed up at the beginning and then they disappear. You know, that's a huge mistake that could happen. How about not being active and visible throughout the project? Could anybody have virtual sponsors on paper or on email? I mean, they say they're with you, but you never see the person. I mean, and everybody's busy, but that's what happens, right? So we have this invisible man or woman who is the one, this is what we want to change. We want to get that person visible and engaged throughout the project, which is a huge challenge. But we're going to have some ideas and thoughts for you on how to do that. And I bet you guys have some great ideas too. And in doing so, I'm going to turn this over to Alex, who's going to run the next portion of this session. And before we do that, Alex, let me just tell you guys what's going to happen today. After we hear all of the phenomenal stories from our experts here in change, which Alex is going to moderate, we're going to have a group exercise where you're going to get to solve a problem. And we're going to give you some time to do that. We're going to facilitate and help you along if you need it, or we're just going to stay out of your way. And we're going to ask one of you at each table to record your solution and then to designate somebody to share. So Alex is going to go through that with you later today, but I just wanted to set the stage. So if any of you guys disappear, okay, we're going to remember that you bailed, that you bailed on us, because we want to make this as much fun and interactive as possible. And then again, it's all about reality bites. So we want to hear the reality from you as well. So we're going to get to do that later on today. Aren't you excited? Okay, so for now, Alex.
Thank you. All right, guys. So the next, I think Lorraine explained a little bit, we're going to go through the panelists' perspectives on change and provide some insight for you, right? So what that'll help do is really frame it out a little bit, give you some data points to kind of start churning those creative thought processes, and then we're going to turn into some of these scenarios, and we're going to throw that at you. You guys are going to do some collaboration, which is, I think, part of the whole outcome of this entire forum today, right, is to build those relationships amongst different state folks, and then be able to come up with some, responses in terms of what the change challenge is, and then get feedback, right? But really the opportunity here, which I think is really wonderful, being a vendor, right, is that the feedback is in a non-critical, non-judgmental way, right? Because when you're in the project and you lob something out, you always have to be politically conscious about, all right, do I put this thing out here? You're in a place where really we're not in that environment. We're in an environment where we have some seasoned executives up here who have gone through some really mind-numbing projects and dealt with those at multiple scales, multiple agencies and departments. And all they're trying to do is give you that insight, that feedback. We're hearing your thinking, and we're going to add our thought process to that so that it helps in evolving that without having to hesitate and think and, be on your own and say, hey, is this, should I even suggest this? So don't hesitate in that suggestion. Bring it to the table, look for that presentation, and then get that feedback, right? Because I think it's a unique opportunity to do that. So in speaking today, I think we're going to start with Paul, right? Paul's with CDCR, and I think you're going to discuss the number one mistake that can derail an effort and opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the problem you always have when somebody says, give me the biggest problem, right? And especially when you're talking to a group full of people, or, a room full of people, is my biggest problem going to be your biggest problem? Okay, so all I'm going to convey here is the biggest problem in general that I have experienced, and I'm going to actually tell you a story of how I experienced it, and maybe you'll share some of the pain I felt. Years ago, the BIZ project, which I'm now the director of, the program director of, went live in corrections. It was a large ERP, does supply chain and HR and all that kinds of stuff. Melanie was there with me, and it was frankly a train wreck. Okay, nothing worked. There was no business transition plan. Communication was non-existent. Our transition plan, when we were in procurement together, was go. Okay, we had no idea where the work was going to come from, where we were going to send the work to, we knew how to make the system work, how to key it in, but we didn't know any of the business processes around it. We didn't have anything built around it. And I was in the business at the time, so I made a huge amount of noise. The project director at the time, a person named Andrea Roman, who became CIO of the state, CIO of the year for the state, came to me and said, you know what, Paul, you can complain or you can come over here and do something about it. So I did. When I arrived, the project team was completely hunkered down. Do you guys know what hunkered down means? Hunkered down means the shelling is so intense, the fire is so intense that they had stopped communicating completely. They were sitting in a room, and I'll never forget, I came in as the change manager. And I had to announce that I was the change manager to these people. I had to come in and say, I have been hired to be your change manager. They did not even know that. That's how bad communications were. So I come down with these people and I said, listen, we got to get out there. We got to get out in front of this thing. And they said, no, no, no. We've got to make sure the message is perfect. This was really, really bad. We can't make 2 mistakes in a row. We've got to make sure the message is perfect. So they sat there for about a week, and they're just tailoring the message and tailoring the message. And I realized I had a big problem on my hands. These people were terrified. They were terrified. They would not stick their head above the wall for fear of being shot. Okay? They were terrified. You were there, right? That was a pretty painful time. And the funny thing is, their first reaction was, don't make a mistake again. Don't make another mistake. So what they did was, nothing. And in that absence of any type of message or any type of communication, what happened? Anyone know? What? It got worse. Anyone else? Anything else happen? People started to make it up for us. They started telling stories about that the system doesn't work. It actually kind of worked. That the training was not right. That it wasn't sized correctly. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. And now all of a sudden we were playing whack-a-mole with rumor control, right? Because somebody would not stand up and say, this is what it is. So a gentleman came in and he took over as the project director, and I convinced him, what we need to do is we need to get in front of everybody and have a meeting and have everybody talk to us. It wasn't talking. It was a lot of screaming. It was a lot of yelling. In fact, there was one gentleman who said there would be a tremendous career to be made here in executive coaching because there were so many people yelling at us at the time. I'll never forget driving back with that project director. We were driving our offices outside of downtown, so we had about a 35-minute ride, which was incredibly quiet. And he turns to me 3/4 of the way over and he says, my God, they were screaming at us. They were screaming at us. And it was the most blown away tone you've ever heard in your life. And I turned to him and I said, yeah, but they're talking. Yeah, but they're talking. I was trying to find the bright side of this thing. But what we realized was we had to get out in front of it. So this guy and I got in a car every day and we drove to every place that the business was done, and we let everybody yell at us. If you've ever done customer service before, ever on the phone or dealing with somebody like that, what happens? What's the very first thing that happens? Somebody calls you up, they're mad. What do? You're nodding your head, and you know what they do.
They want to talk to you.
That's right, and they scream, and they want to elevate over your head, and they're yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling. If you try to solve at any point during that yelling, what happens? It gets worse. It gets more intense. But what you do instead is you listen. You listen. And then all of a sudden you're going to hear this one thing, and it's magical. And every time it happens, ready? I don't mean to yell at you, but, right? And that's when you get to solve. So what I'm trying to say to you is, when you're in these types of situations, don't hunker down. Engage. Listen. Don't try to answer the question too soon. Listen, because you don't even know what the question is. You don't even know what the problem is. They haven't told you yet. Wait for the breath. But have the courage to stand there and listen. Because we're project folks, right? We chose this on purpose. We're not program folks. We chose this on purpose. So when you're doing this from a communication standpoint, from a change management standpoint, have the courage to stand there and listen to your customer even in the worst times. And at that point, they're going to tell you what they really need to get done and get fixed. And they did. And we did. And Biz works. It's actually won a national award. So what I'm trying to point out to you is the biggest mistake is don't hunker down. Do the exact opposite. I know you want to keep your head down. I know it's hard to get yelled at, but do the opposite. Stand up. Own it. Be honest. Listen. Wait for the real question or issue. And then engage. And you'll find that your customer will be willing to engage with you because you had the courtesy to listen and you had the respect to stand there and take it. You will find that they will engage with you. So that's just my story. Any questions or any issues that somebody else may have something, their own personal one? Okay.
Yeah, feel free to ask questions at this point. You know, it's okay. You know, break in. Anybody?